Sure.
Joining me now is the vice chair of the committee in charge of getting Senate Republicans elected or re-elected. It's Thom Tillis of North Carolina. Senator Tillis, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning.
Let me start with the Saudi Arabia issue and the killing of Mr. Khashoggi. You probably may not have seen, but at least heard the timeline. It took the Saudis 17 days. Same question that I had for Senator Durbin. Is there any part of the Saudi government's explanation that you find credible?
No, not at this point. I agree with everything Dick Durbin just said. We've got to get to the bottom of it. In Saudi Arabia, you do not do something of this magnitude without having clearance from the top. We need to find out who that is and hold them accountable. Are
you as convinced as Senators Corker and Durbin are, that the Crown Prince himself ordered this killing?
Well, it looks like it based on the people who were involved in the actual act. I think that's why we need the help from the Turkish officials to get as much information as we have, draw a conclusion, and then there has to be a consequence for it.
What does a consequence look like? And what is the goal of the consequence? Is it to get the Saudis, the king, to name a new crown prince? What would be the goal of the punishment?
Well, I think it is to hold the people accountable who committed this horrible act. And if it is the crown prince, then I think that is something that has to be explored. I don't believe that you can have someone who would authorize this sort of an act, be in a position of power with a nation that's very important to us, but we have to have limits as to how far we would go to work with them in a very difficult, complex part of the world. And I think that we have to do the investigation with the intelligence community, with the Turkish officials, Saudi officials outside of the Crown Prince to get to the bottom of it.
Are you at all concerned that the president seems to be maybe more patient than necessary with the Saudi government?
Well, I think that all you're seeing is the public response. I know that the State Department, the intelligence community, and a number of other people are taking this seriously. We've got a lot of resources focused on it, and I think the president will take the appropriate action when all the facts are in.
Can you imagine us having a relationship with the Saudi government that's positive if the Crown Prince is still there?
No, I don't think so. I think, again, if the facts lead to what we all suspect they will, I think it'll be very problematic for our relationship going forward.
Let me move to the midterms. The president says these midterms are about the following: Kavanaugh, the caravan, law and order, and common sense. You're the vice chair of the NRSC. Is that the best summation that you would advise Republican candidates to give around the country?
I think those are factors, but I believe historic job creation, historically low unemployment among Latinos and African Americans, the economic performance, the work that we've done to get NATO to contribute to our mutual defense. There are a lot of things that resonate with the voters. And again, I look at the top line numbers that you gave earlier in a more specific way and how they're playing in states that we're targeting. And we're looking very good in a number of other states. I fully expect we're going to add to our numbers in the Senate for the Republicans.
I want to show you a column that conservative Ramesh Ponnuru wrote in Bloomberg earlier this week. At the end of 2017, he was talking about the Republican agenda. House Speaker Paul Ryan was pushing Republicans to take up welfare reform. The Trump administration talked up an infrastructure bill. The party compromised by not making a concerted effort on either. But Republicans are asking for voters to augment that majority now, and they still have no agenda. What would you say is the case for re-electing a Republican majority in the Senate going forward beyond just confirming judges?
I think you go back to the age-old question in elections. Do you feel better about your economic circumstances today than you did 2 years ago? And I think the answer to that question is absolutely yes. I think that most voters vote their pocketbook. I do believe that the Kavanaugh matter ended up increasing intensity on our side, but only slightly. We typically have greater intensity going into the off-year elections. But I think this is about economic security, economic growth. Those are promises that we've made and we've fulfilled. It's difficult to get some of the things done. We want to continue to work on infrastructure, but an FAA bill, the jobs, the economies, those sorts of things matter to the voters, and I think they're going to put us in a great position in the Senate.
One issue you didn't mention that Senator Durbin mentioned nonstop was health care and the issue of pre-existing conditions. In 2014, you ran, I remember covering your race down there, it's when we first met, you ran as a repeal and replace Obamacare Republican. Why aren't we hearing that this time around? We don't really hear Republicans talking about repeal and replace. Is it because of the popularity of the pre-existing condition clause?
No, well, for one thing, it's a false narrative to say that we want to remove pre-existing conditions. I've filed a bill, got several co-sponsors to try and, in the event that a lawsuit throws out the Affordable Care Act, we have to have a place for people with pre-existing conditions to land. We also have to allow young adults under the age of 26 to be on their parents' health care plan. It is a false narrative to say that Republicans want to kill that. It's simply not true.
But
There's not enough votes to do it.
But in fairness, you've had 4 years in the majority in the Senate to come up with an alternative, in 2 years with full Republican control of Washington.
Yeah, and I know you know how D.C. works probably better than I do. You got to get 60 votes to make that happen. We did, through reconciliation, get rid of the individual mandate and take some of the underpinnings of the Affordable Care Act out. We've got to replace it in the same way that we've got to make sure that Social Security and Medicare can be paid for, and Medicaid over time. What the Democrats are not mentioning are widely publicized reports that say if we stay on the current trajectory, we're going to have a crisis in funding in those programs. No one wants to take away Medicare, Social Security, or Medicaid from people who need it, but we have to have a sustainable solution, and we need 60 votes to get that done.
Math is a funny thing here in Washington. Nobody seems to want to ever cite it, but we have a record-breaking deficit. A record-breaking debt every day when you watch the debt clock, but a record-breaking deficit this year that may surpass $1 trillion. You now annually, never mind obviously the multiples of that in the debt. The president yesterday is talking about a new tax cut. You're talking about reforming Social Security and Medicare. How are you going to pay for this tax cut that the president is apparently proposing?
Well, we've got to make sure that it's at least supported by facts around dynamic growth. It has to pay for itself. We can't go further in debt. I voted against the spending bill, the most recent one, because it was just too much money being spent. And so we've got to get the American people to recognize that we have a powder keg of dynamite in a debt that's continuing to grow. We're reaching a point where our debt service could exceed our contribution or our investment in the military. We've got to make sure that the American people understand we've got to balance our books. We got to be on a budget just like the American people are.
You just said you wanted any new tax cut to pay for itself. This current tax cut's clearly not paying for itself. The debt's increasing, not decreasing, and there's no sign that it's going to decrease.
Well, if you take a look at the scoring for economic growth over time, I think that there is a way to rationalize that this tax cut will pay for itself through sustained economic growth. If we don't make the numbers, it won't. But if we do, and we're already seeing it early into this cycle, then I do believe that we create the net incremental revenue. It's not going to be enough to come anywhere close to retiring our $21 trillion in debt. That's where we're going to have to look at tough choices so that we can balance our books.
Senator Thom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for coming on, sharing your views. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
When we